I know you established Continental Championship Wrestling in 1985. By 88, you had sold Continental, but then like right after you founded USA Championship Wrestling, can you talk about selling Continental and then like soon after starting up USA? And then I know USA only went for I think 6 months if my notes are correct, but I kind of wanted to get some background on that and understand that like the selling of Continental and then founding USA and then selling USA, which I know once you sold USA, that's when you got into hockey, I believe. So if you could talk a little bit about that and tell me what was going on back then, that would be really nice.
Okay. Yeah, Continental was great. Continental did really, really wonderful. Business was fabulous for us. What we had done is originally I started out in Knoxville. I had a territory that was basically a small little territory in the eastern side of Tennessee. We went into West Virginia. We went into Kentucky. We went into a little bit in North Carolina. But then when I expanded, I went and bought another business. I started another business that ran along the Gulf Coast. And my thoughts were originally that I want to combine these two companies into a big company. But it didn't happen because Southeastern had some problems right at the very end, the Northern Division, and they ended up going to the South. We had about 5 partners involved in which was Southeastern Wrestling. It was still called Southeastern Wrestling. Then we expanded back. I had a friend of mine that lived in Knoxville, and he had a connection with the TV people. We had been gone from Tennessee for 5 years. And when I sold Knoxville, the people, no one could follow what we did. We had been so strong there and over so good that wrestling basically died for 5 years in that eastern side of Tennessee. Wasn't even being run finally. And I had a guy call me from there, one of my friends, and said, Ron, I can get you on Channel 6 in Knoxville. And I said, let's do it. Let's put it back on. I did not know whether we'd go back up there as a powerful entity or not. But it turned out we went back there as a tremendously strong entity. It was a homecoming for us, me and Bob Armstrong and Robert and Jimmy Golden and Joe LeDuc, and there was just so many guys that had been huge stars in Knoxville, been gone for 5 years. We went back and just totally lit it up. So when we expanded, I wanted to compete with Vince. I was talking about that earlier. I wanted to compete with Vince. So I said, we need to come with a bigger title. We're running now in 7 or 8 states, and let's change our name to Continental. And my partners agreed that was a great idea. We rolled along there very well for about 3 years. I kind of got tired. To be honest with you, I'd been wrestling for 20 years, and I'd been running my own companies for 15 of that 20. And it was a grind. So I'd burn out, basically. And I finally said, guys, I want out. And they said, well, if you're going to get out, we want out. So we sold to a gentleman out of Montgomery, Alabama that owned a television station. David Woods was his name.
Mm-hmm.
And we sold Continental to him. And then we were still running Knoxville. He did not buy Knoxville. He bought the southern end of the territory, basically, because his station was in Montgomery. He wasn't interested in what was happening in the northern part of the area that we ran. So I decided that I'll go up there and we start up a USA Wrestling. I figured I'd give it another shot. And we did about 6 months, and then he came to me and said, I want to buy this. I want to buy this too. And by then, I was already a little burnt out. Now I'm beginning to get burnt out again. It's about 6 months later. And I just said, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and do it. So I made a deal with David Woods that had bought Continental from me, and he bought USA Wrestling from me. He just put it under the name of Continental. And they started coming back to Knoxville and wrestling in Knoxville again. And that's kind of how that all changed hands and basically how it happened. Had a good group of wrestlers in USA. I mean, we had a quality little group of wrestlers, Bill Dundee, and we had some great guys in there, Stomper and Ron Wright and Bob Armstrong and a couple of his boys. Brad was great at that point and still alive. And There was Scott's coming along, and it was Davy Rich and Johnny Rich, and I mean, it was a pretty nice little group of guys, and a pretty nice little program actually. It was done in a ballroom. It was done in a
Yep.
ballroom at the Coliseum.
Yep.
Bigger than
I've seen
right,
some
three
of it.
times. Yeah, three times the size of a regular studio. It had a nice feel, and it was always full, always packed, and always very responsive crowd. It was a pretty decent little operation for a small operation.
Yeah, it was I was always curious how that worked because I knew, in reading and hearing some of your stories that, you sold in '88, and I was like, it confused me. I said he sold, but then, USA popped up, and what I didn't realize was the part that you sold it, but Knoxville wasn't being run, so you kind of gave it, I guess, one last. It sounds like you gave it one last hoorah, so to say, and then it was like, no, it's time to do something else in life. And then plus by that point, the national expansion from Vince McMahon was way underway. I mean, that started in end of '83, starting in '84. So I can see how at that point you were like, yeah, it might be time to move on.
Well,
And I heard your story on a Studcast where you were talking about Vince McMahon. So I'll direct people to episode number 2 because I saved it because I'm going to revisit it every now and then because I actually loved what you had to say on that episode.
yeah, and I could kind of see the writing on the wall. And
Yes.
once you got that national television, and it was a shame that Vince got it.
Yeah.
And I don't have any qualms about being honest and telling my true feelings about it. And Vince, I just don't feel like was the right guy. Had it been someone else that had gotten that program, and I had opportunity, that's one of the things that Continental did for me. Our program was being bought in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Arab Emirates. I mean, we were being recognized around the world. But once you get that national television program, then you're going to be the king, and that's basically what happened. And I think a lot of guys stayed and fought the fight, and it didn't work out for them. They didn't win, obviously, and I think a lot of them lost money toward the end. And I feel like I got out at a pretty good time because I got paid for it. I didn't just walk away from it. Someone bought it from me, and it was probably a good, wise decision on my part.